Hi guys, I just wanted to introduce our assignment for this unit, and it's an assignment we would have done even if we were in class. And it's a good opportunity to make use of some of the things that we've been doing with one variable and two variable stats, some of those techniques. So basically we're going to use the data that we collected, plus a little bit more, through that census at school application. You remember we did something in class where we measured arm length and reaction time and height and a whole bunch of other things on a website that collected the data. So what you're going to do is on Google Drive you'll find all these different files, and this is the actual assignment here. So you can take a look through it. Basically what you're going to do is to try to make a correlation or a link between two things. And just to warn you, most of the time what will happen is that you won't find any correlation between things, but it's just to investigate and to apply the techniques that we're doing, and sometimes it is kind of interesting. So first thing you should do is probably go to the survey questions just to familiarize yourself again with what questions were asked. These are some of the questions, so like your height, your arm span, the length of your foot, all the way down to things like what sports do you like, do you smoke, things like that. So just go through and that'll give you an idea of what types of things you're going to look at. And so then you can see here what you're going to do is try to make some sort of link between these two, some sort of correlation. So it could be simple, like something like wrist size determines someone's height, which is related to activity, or people over a certain height are more likely to speak more than one language. People who look up to musicians are more likely to have a better memory, things like that. So it's quite endless in terms of the options. So in order to do that, you can either use Excel or Fathom. If you are able to use Fathom, I strongly recommend that you do it, but you would have to buy the license for a year or uninstall it and reinstall it with a new name, and you'll get 30 days for free. So this is the Fathom data. So these are our class data, although I've added more to it. I've used in other classes because there wasn't enough in there. And so if you go into Fathom and you open up this little collection box, you get all of this stuff here. And if you want, you can enlarge it. But these are all of the questions that were asked within the survey. So let's say I take something simple. So I'm going to pull down a graph. So I go up there and I grab it, I click and I pull. So let's say I want to compare height versus arm span. So I pull height down onto the x-axis and I'm going to pull arm span onto the y-axis like this. And it automatically creates a little scatter plot for you. So the analysis part, so you can see there's definitely some sort of link, although we have a couple outliers where somebody probably didn't input the data right. So if I wanted to analyze this to create a least squares line, I would right click down here and I would scroll down, and here it will say least squares line. And so you put it in, it automatically gives you an equation and the r squared. You can even now after that put in a residual plot if you want and things like that. So that's a really simple example. And so you would be doing this with the analysis and you would make a discussion about this, and the information on what to include in this assignment is on that handout. But like let's say we wanted to do something a bit more complex, and so another option here that's kind of interesting, like let's say we want to do the number of languages someone speaks. So I'm going to pull that down to one graph. I'm going to change that to a histogram. So let's say there's some sort of correlation between the number of languages someone speaks and their reaction time. And so what I can do, and this is what's unique to Fathom, is I can highlight within one graph, let's say the number of people, the people who speak 3 languages, and that will highlight all of the individuals. So I pull reaction time down here within this graph. So notice all these red things. And so there's a couple outliers here. Someone must have messed up when they did this, but I can rescale this because the majority of my data is down here under 1 second. And so I can rescale it. Like let's say I want to look at the one person who speaks 4 languages. So you can see they were actually the quickest person in the class. Let's say I want to look at the number of people who speak 1 language, and the reaction times are almost all on the higher end here. So there's some sort of relationship, or in this case, there's a relationship. And so Fathom allows you to do a whole bunch of different things like that. And so again, there's so many different options you can do, and I would just play around. So if you can use this, that would be great. If you can, it's not the end of the world. Like let's say there's one about pressure in school. And so I'll unclick this by just clicking the background. And you want to relate that to someone's foot size, which doesn't make any sense, but let's just say that. And so I can do that. And so you can change this. So I can say people who are very pressured feel or very little pressure over here and things like that. So pretty unique to Fathom to be able to do that, and it's really quick to change between graphs. If I go over to Excel, so let's say I open up our class data for Excel. It's a bit harder. You can't do that kind of thing. You're going to have to just pick things like, let's say there's a relationship between height and arm span. So I'll highlight those 2 columns, and you can go to Insert, and if you want, Recommended Charts, and it gives you a chart like that. And so it gives you this graph. And so you'll have to do some formatting here within Excel, which isn't too bad. Like one thing, you can add least squares line. So if I right-click on that, it adds a trend line. And so that gives you a trend line. You can pick between the various types. You can also even put in the equation and an R squared. It'll do the analysis. And this is actually the same as what Fathom would do. And you can rescale the axes if you click on the axes. Sometimes you got to click over to this. There we go. And oops, if I re-click on that, and I want to rescale this so it's not so far down. So I'm going to have it start at 150. If I do that, there we go. So that looks a bit better. And so you can label these different things. And so you can do some of these things within Excel or Sheets or the Google version. Like let's say you wanted height versus reaction time, so you'd have to highlight those 2. And again, you go Insert, Recommended Charts, and you get something like that. And you can do something similar things to that. While you're doing this, make note of outliers. Do you want to include them within your analysis? Things like that. And so lots of things to do. So hopefully if you have any questions about it, it's going to be answered here. But what I'd like you to do, so you decide first what you're going to investigate. You do the investigation. And then you're actually going to do the exact same thing with 200 random students that are Canadian students. So there's another file here, both for Fathom and Excel, that has the same information, only with different people from across Canada. So what you're going to do is compare our data to a random sample of 200 students. And again, that's explained on the handout. So your investigation should be 1 to 2 pages and should follow this: a brief introduction, statement of your hypothesis, and then your analysis, the most relevant charts, graphs, any analysis including linear regression, correlation coefficient, medians, mean, median, mode, that kind of thing. And then your results and discussion of your results. Does your correlation imply causation, and what your limitations are in your project. So I'll post an exemplar for this as well. So the assignment will be marked. It's communication mark, inquiry, and knowledge. So again, 1 to 2 pages, and here's a marking rubric here that you can go through that's got information. So of course, if you have any questions, let me know, and you might have questions about how to use different things. Try to be resourceful, but of course I can help you as well. Okay, see you.